The automatic doors of Mercy General Hospital exploded open as Donovan Sterling crashed through them. Rain streaming from his $1,000 suit, his usually perfect composure completely shattered. Thunder cracked overhead, like the world itself was breaking apart. "Where is she?" His voice echoed through the emergency room, causing nurses to freeze mid-stride. "Celeste Winters, where is my wife?" A young nurse stepped forward, her scrubs already blood-stained from the chaos of the night. "Sir, you need to—" "She's coding. We need that blood now." "Doctor," Reeves' voice cut through the air as she rounded the corner at a run, her white coat billowing behind her. "Mr. Sterling? Thank God you're here. We have minutes, not hours." The call that changes everything always comes when you least expect it. For Donovan Sterling, billionaire CEO of Sterling Industries, it came at 11:47 p.m. on the worst storm the city had seen in decades. He'd been sitting in his corner office, divorce papers spread across his desk, like a map of his failures, when an unknown number lit up his phone screen. Now here he was, his billion-dollar empire meaningless as he followed Dr. Reeves through corridors that smelled of disinfectant and desperation. His designer shoes squeaked against the linoleum, each step a countdown to either salvation or devastation. Have you ever lost someone because you were too blind to see what mattered? Have you ever built a kingdom of gold while your real treasure slipped through your fingers like sand? If you're new here, hit that subscribe button because trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. When success becomes your obsession, love becomes your casualty. Donovan Sterling learned this lesson the hard way when his wife of 3 years walked out, claiming she couldn't compete with his first love anymore, his company. He'd let her go, too proud to fight, too focused on his next merger to notice his world was falling apart. "Oh, negative blood," Dr. Reeves was saying as they rushed past rooms filled with other people's tragedies. "You're her only match in the city tonight. The blood bank is empty. There was a pile up on the highway, multiple casualties, and then she came in. Pregnant," Donovan whispered, the word foreign on his tongue. "With twins. You're twins, Mr. Sterling. But what happens when life gives you one last chance to make things right? What happens when the universe itself conspires to show you exactly what you've thrown away? Tonight, you're about to find out. Because sometimes the greatest love stories aren't about the beginning. They're about the second chance that almost never came." 5 years earlier, Donovan Sterling had walked into a small coffee shop on Madison Avenue with the confidence of a man who owned half the city. He was 28, already worth his first $100 million, and utterly convinced that money could solve any problem. Triple shot espresso, no foam, exactly 180 degrees in a real cup. Not paper. He'd barked at the blonde barista without looking up from his phone. "Wow." The voice dripped with amusement. "That's the most pretentious order I've heard all week, and trust me, the competition is fierce." Donovan's head snapped up, ready to demand the manager, but the words died in his throat. Green eyes sparkled with mischief behind the counter, paired with a smile. That suggested she found him more entertaining than intimidating. Celeste, her name tag read. She leaned forward, elbows on the counter. "Tell me something. Does ordering coffee like a drill sergeant actually make it taste better? Or is this just how rich boys assert dominance?" Nobody spoke to Donovan Sterling that way. Nobody. Yet instead of anger, he felt something shift in his chest, like tectonic plates realigning after years of stillness. "Maybe I should try something different," he heard himself say. "Revolutionary concept." She grinned. "How about I make you what I think you need, not what you think you want?" That first cup of coffee, a simple cappuccino with a heart drawn in foam, changed everything. Donovan found himself returning every morning, not for the caffeine, but for the girl who treated him like a human being instead of a bank account. Within 6 months, they were inseparable. Celeste became his anchor in a world of hostile takeovers and cutthroat negotiations. She'd sit cross-legged on his office floor at midnight, Chinese takeout boxes scattered around them, listening as he explained his vision for Sterling Industries. "You're going to change the world," she'd say, her faith in him absolute. "We're going to change it together," he'd promise, pulling her close. The wedding happened in a whirlwind, a small ceremony that Celeste planned while Donovan closed a $50 million deal from the altar via text message. She'd laughed it off then, calling him her adorable workaholic, but looking back, the signs were already there. Year 1 disappeared in acquisition meetings and international expansions. Celeste decorated their penthouse alone, ate dinner alone, fell asleep alone while Donovan built his empire one contract at a time. Happy anniversary, she'd whispered to his voicemail when he missed their first one for a conference in Tokyo. I'll save you some cake. Year 2 brought broken promises stacked like unpaid bills. The vacation to Greece, canceled for an emergency board meeting. Her birthday dinner, interrupted by a crisis in the London office. The dance lessons they'd planned, forgotten beneath quarterly projections. It's fine, Celeste would say, her smile growing brittler with each disappointment. I understand. The company needs you. By year 3, she'd stopped saying it was fine. She'd stopped saying much of anything. The night she left played in Donovan's memory with painful clarity. He'd come home at 2 a.m. to find her sitting in the dark living room, 2 suitcases beside her feet. Another late night? Her voice was hollow, drained of the warmth that used to fill their home. The Singapore merger required, I don't care. The words came out soft but final. I really, truly don't care anymore, Donovan. And that's how I know it's over. Celeste, please. I'm doing this for us, for our future. We don't have a future. She stood, and in the city lights streaming through the windows, he saw tears tracking down her cheeks. You have a future with Sterling Industries. I'm just the woman who sleeps in your bed sometimes, when you remember to come home. That's not fair. You knew who I was when you married me. I married a man who stayed up all night talking about changing the world with technology and compassion. I married someone who danced with me in this kitchen and promised we'd build a life together. Her voice cracked. I'm leaving a stranger who measures love in stock options and scheduled 15-minute phone calls between meetings. Don't be dramatic. We can work through this. I'll try to be home more. When? She laughed, but it sounded like breaking glass. Pencil me in between Tokyo and the quarterly review. Schedule our marriage like another merger to manage. The contrast hit him now as he ran through the hospital, his office all glass and steel and cold. Efficiency versus the warmth of their early days when success meant her smile over morning coffee. If this story touches your heart, hit that like button. Because sometimes we all need reminders about what really matters before it's too late. This way, Mr. Sterling, Dr. Reeves urged, pulling him back to the present. We don't have much time. But Donovan's mind lingered on that last image, Celeste walking out the door, taking all. The light with her, leaving him alone in his perfectly successful, perfectly empty life. The phone call that shattered Donovan's world had started like 1,000 others. He'd been staring at Celeste's signature on the divorce papers, tracing the loops of her name with his finger, when the unknown number flashed across his screen. Donovan Sterling, he'd answered automatically, his CEO voice still intact despite the whiskey. Mr. Sterling, this is Dr. Patricia Reeves, Chief of Obstetrics at Mercy General Hospital. A pause that stretched like a chasm. I'm calling about Celeste Winters. You're listed as her emergency contact. Former wife, he'd corrected, the words tasting like ash. Is she... What's wrong? Mr. Sterling, I need you to listen very carefully. Miss Winters came in tonight in advanced labor with severe complications. She's experiencing what we call placental abruption. The placenta has separated from the uterine wall. Labor? The glass tumbled from his hand, shattering across Italian marble. She's pregnant? With twins, Mr. Sterling. 34 weeks. Right now she's hemorrhaging badly. We've performed an emergency C-section, but she's lost a dangerous amount of blood. Our blood bank is critically low due to a multi-vehicle accident earlier, and she has O-negative blood. You're listed as the same type. Without an immediate transfusion, I'm coming. He was already moving, grabbing his coat. Tell her to hold on. Tell her, there's no time for messages, Mr. Sterling. Just get here. The ride to Mercy General became a blur of rain-slashed windows and memories attacking him like shards of glass. Marcus, his driver, took corners at dangerous speeds while Donovan sat rigid in the back seat, his mind racing faster than the car. Twins. She'd been carrying twins. His twins. For months she'd been alone, growing their children while he'd been growing his portfolio. The last time they'd been together, that final night before she'd left, played in his mind with new significance. I'll always love you, she'd whispered against his shoulder. That's the worst part. Had she known then? Had she suspected? Faster, Marcus, he commanded, watching the speedometer climb. Sir, the roads are dangerous. My children are being born and their mother is dying. The words ripped from his throat. Drive faster. Every red light felt like a personal attack. Every mile stretched endlessly. His phone buzzed with messages from board members about tomorrow's presentation. and he wanted to hurl it through the window. How many nights had he chosen those messages over his marriage? How many times had he prioritized profit margins over the person who'd loved him before he'd had anything to offer? The hospital finally appeared through the storm, its emergency entrance glowing like salvation or damnation. He wasn't sure which. Donovan burst from the car before Marcus had fully stopped, racing through puddles that soaked his Italian leather shoes. Inside, controlled chaos reigned. Dr. Reeves appeared like an angel of efficiency, already moving. This way, we've managed to deliver the babies safely, but Celeste, she pushed through double doors. She's lost too much blood. Her pressure's dropping rapidly. Through a window, Donovan saw her, and his knees nearly buckled. Celeste lay still as death on the operating table, her skin the color of paper. Machines surrounded her, their screens showing numbers that meant nothing to him, except that they kept dropping. Medical staff moved with practiced urgency, their faces grim. Is she? She's fighting, but she needs blood now. Doctor, Reeves guided him to an adjacent room, where a nurse waited with equipment. We'll run a direct transfusion, faster than processing through bags. A young nurse, barely out of school by her appearance, helped him onto a gurney. The baby's father should know they're stable, she said to Dr. Reeves. Both infants are in the NICU but breathing on their own. The words hit Donovan like a physical blow. Baby's father, not ex-husband, not former CEO, father. Can I see her? He asked as the nurse searched for a vein. The window, Dr. Reeves indicated. But you need to stay still once we start. They positioned his gurney so he could watch through the glass. The needle went in, and soon his blood flowed through clear tubing, racing to save the woman he'd failed to cherish. How long has she been pregnant without telling me? The question escaped before he could stop it. That's not for me to say, Dr. Reeves replied carefully. What matters now is that you're here. As his blood drained into the tubes, a memory surfaced with startling clarity. A charity gala 2 years ago. He'd been organizing executive blood donations for good publicity, lecturing everyone about civic duty. I wish, Celeste had said quietly, watching him roll up his sleeve for the cameras. You could give me your time like you give your blood to charity galas, freely, generously, without checking your phone every 30 seconds. He'd brushed off her comment then, too focused on the photo opportunity to hear the plea beneath her words. Now, as his literal lifeblood flowed toward her failing body, the irony cut deep. She'd asked for his time, his presence, his attention. Instead, she was getting his blood, because he'd given her nothing else when it mattered. Her pressure stabilizing, someone called from the operating room. But Donovan barely heard them. He was lost in the realization that he was finally giving Celeste something she needed, something only he could provide. Too late for their marriage, maybe too late for everything, but not too late to save her life. Not too late to ensure their children had a mother. Take it all, he whispered to the nurse. Whatever she needs, take it all. The waiting room became Donovan's purgatory. After giving 2 pints of blood, the maximum they'd allow, he'd been banished to uncomfortable plastic chairs while Celeste fought for her life behind closed doors. The clock on the wall moved with sadistic slowness. 2:47 a.m., 3:15 a.m., 3:42 a.m. Around him, other families occupied their own islands of worry. A grandmother knitted with shaking hands. A father paced while his teenagers slept across 3 chairs. They all recognized him. His face had graced enough magazine covers, but tragedy was the great equalizer. Here, his billions meant nothing. That's Donovan Sterling, someone whispered. The tech billionaire. Money can't buy everything, another voice replied, not unkindly. Look at him. Just another scared man hoping someone he loves survives the night. The observation hit harder than any hostile takeover ever had. They were right. His entire empire, every dollar in his accounts, every connection in his phone, none of it mattered. He couldn't buy Celeste a new heart if hers stopped. Couldn't purchase more time if she ran out. Dr. Reeves appeared at 4:15 a.m., exhaustion etched into every line of her face. She sat beside him, and Donovan braced for the worst. She's stable for now, critical but stable. The transfusion bought us the time we needed. Thank God. His voice broke on the words. Mr. Sterling, there's something you should know. Doctor. Reeves chose her words carefully. Celeste has been my patient throughout this pregnancy. She specifically asked that you not be contacted. But she listed me as emergency contact? Old paperwork. She probably forgot to update it. Or maybe... The doctor studied him. Maybe part of her hoped you'd be here if the worst happened. Tell me about the pregnancy. Please, I need to know what you went through. Dr. Reeves sighed. She found out 2 weeks after your separation. First trimester was rough. Severe morning sickness while trying to establish her new life. She took a job at a bookstore, lived in a studio apartment, never once complained, even when she could barely keep food down. Each word was a knife. His wife, former wife, working retail while carrying his children, living in some cramped apartment while he slept in a penthouse that echoed with emptiness. Second trimester brought complications, high blood pressure, gestational diabetes. She managed it all alone, taking 3 buses to get to appointments because she sold her car. I offered to contact you several times. She always refused. What did she say? Donovan had to know that you'd come back out of obligation, not love. That you'd see the babies as another project to manage, another acquisition to oversee. She wanted... Dr. Reeves paused. She wanted her children to be loved for who they were, not what they represented to your legacy. The truth of it shattered something inside him. Donovan fumbled for his phone, scrolling to his board's group message. These people who'd convinced him that profit mattered more than presence. That success was measured in market shares rather than shared moments. Donovan? Garrett, his CFO, answered on the first ring despite the hour. Ready to crush tomorrow's presentation? I'm done. The words came out between sobs he couldn't control. I'm stepping back. Effective immediately. What? Don, you're not making sense. The Japanese deal. My children were born tonight. Donovan's voice cracked completely. Twins, Garrett. I have twins, and I didn't even know they existed because I was too busy building a company to notice I'd destroyed my family. I'm done. You want the CEO position? It's yours. Don, let's not make rash decisions. Donovan hung up. The phone clattered to the floor, and he buried his face in his hands, shoulders shaking with the force of suppressed grief. Son? A gentle hand touched his shoulder. Donovan looked up to find a janitor, probably in his 70s, offering a box of tissues. Rough night? The worst, the best. I don't know anymore. The old man sat down, his mop bucket forgotten. Wife and babies. Ex-wife. She left because I couldn't see past my own ambition. Now she might die thinking I never loved her enough. But you're here now. Too late. Let me tell you something, the janitor said, his voice carrying the weight of experience. I've been cleaning these halls for 30 years, seen all kinds of folks come through. Rich, poor, young, old. You know what I've never seen? Someone on their deathbed wishing they'd spent more time at the office. The simple truth of it struck Donovan speechless. Being here now doesn't erase the past, the man continued. But it's a start. Every journey begins with one step, even if that step comes later than it should. What would you sacrifice for a second chance? Comment below and share your thoughts on what really matters in life. The janitor patted Donovan's shoulder once more before returning to his work, leaving the billionaire alone with his regrets, and the dawning realization that perhaps, just perhaps, it wasn't too late to become the man his family needed. At 5:30 a.m., Dr. Reeves found Donovan still sitting in the waiting room, staring at his hands as if they held answers to questions he'd never thought to ask. Mr. Sterling. Her voice was gentler now. Celeste is holding steady. Would you like to meet your children? The walk to the neonatal intensive care unit felt like crossing into another universe. Through reinforced glass doors, past hand sanitizing stations, and whispered instructions about proper procedures, Dr. Reeves led him to 2 small incubators positioned side by side. Baby girl Sterling. Read the nameplate on the left. Baby boy Sterling on the right. Donovan approached slowly, as if sudden movements might break the spell. Inside the clear plastic chambers, 2 impossibly tiny humans slept beneath warming lights, their chests rising and falling with the rhythm of life itself. They're so small, he whispered. 34 weeks is early, but they're fighters, strong lungs, good reflexes, no major complications, which is remarkable given the trauma of tonight. The baby girl had wisps of golden hair that caught the light like spun silk, Celeste's hair, the same shade that had spilled across his pillow every morning for 3 years. Her tiny fist was curled near her cheek, and even in sleep, her face held a determined expression that reminded him of her mother's stubborn streak. She's been fussier than her brother, a nurse mentioned quietly. Very vocal about her opinions. Just like Celeste, Donovan found himself smiling through tears he didn't remember starting. The boy was larger, darker-haired, with serious eyebrows that furrowed even in sleep. His hands, though miniature, had long fingers that would someday, Donovan realized, with startling clarity, be capable of creating, building, holding someone he loved. "He looks like you did in your baby photos," Dr. Reeves observed. Same intense expression, like he's already planning his first business venture. But as Donovan studied his son's peaceful face, he felt a fierce protectiveness. That had nothing to do with business plans or future achievements. This child would never know the loneliness of empty penthouses or the hollow victory of succeeded deals that meant nothing. This boy would know his father's presence, his attention, his love measured not in trust, funds, but in bedtime stories and baseball games and quiet conversations about life. "What legacy really means," he murmured, pressing his palm against the incubator's surface. "It's not what you build in boardrooms. It's who you raise to carry your love forward." The girl stirred, tiny mouth opening in what might have been a yawn or protest. Her brother shifted in response, and suddenly Donovan understood something profound. These two had been together since their beginning, companions in Celeste's womb, partners facing this uncertain world. They would never be alone the way he'd been alone in his success. "They take care of each other," the nurse smiled. "When one gets agitated, the other seems to sense it." We've never seen siblings this attuned. A sudden commotion from the hallway shattered the peaceful moment. Dr. Reeves's pager exploded with urgent beeping, and she was moving before the sound stopped. "Celeste," she called over her shoulder, already running. "She's crashing again." Donovan's reflection stared back at him from the incubator's glass, a man transformed beyond recognition. Gone was the polished CEO who'd walked into this hospital hours ago. In his place stood someone raw, desperate, and finally awake to what mattered. His expensive suit was wrinkled, his perfect hair disheveled, his face marked by tears he'd never allowed himself to shed. But his eyes held something they'd never held before. Not the calculating gleam of a man measuring profit margins, but the fierce love of a father who would move mountains to protect his family. "Stay strong," he whispered to his sleeping children. "Daddy's here now, and I'm never leaving you again." In the glass, his reflection nodded back, a promise made to the man he'd finally become. Celeste's eyes opened 12 hours later, focusing slowly on the sterile ceiling tiles above her hospital bed. For a moment, confusion clouded her features, then memory crashed back like a wave. Her hand instinctively moved to her now empty belly. "The babies," she whispered, her voice hoarse from the breathing tube. "They're safe. They're perfect." Donovan's voice came from the chair beside her bed, where he'd maintained his vigil. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and stubble covered his usually clean-shaven jaw. A boy and a girl. Healthy, strong. Celeste turned her head slowly, taking in his disheveled appearance. When their eyes met, hers held no warmth, no relief at seeing him, only a cold wariness that cut him deeper than any boardroom betrayal ever could. "You came," she said flatly. "Of course I came. Celeste, when they called, I didn't put you on the emergency contact list." Her voice carried the exhaustion of someone who'd fought death and won, but barely. "I specifically removed your name. Old paperwork," Dr. Reeves said. "But I'm glad it happened. God, Celeste, I could have lost you. I could have lost all of you without ever knowing they existed." She closed her eyes, a single tear escaping. That was the point. "Why?" The word came out broken. "Why would you hide this from me? They're my children too." "Because I knew exactly what would happen." Her eyes opened, fixing him with a stare that held 3 years of accumulated disappointment. "You'd come back, not because you loved me, but because it was the responsible thing to do. The Sterling legacy needed heirs, and you'd manage our family like another subsidiary of your empire. That's not fair, isn't it?" Celeste struggled to sit up, wincing. "Tell me, Donovan, in all those months after I left, how many times did you call? How many times did you show up at my apartment, or the bookstore where I worked, fighting for us?" The silence stretched between them like an accusation. "You didn't even know I was working at a bookstore," she continued, her voice gaining strength. "You didn't know I sold our car to pay for prenatal vitamins. You didn't know I spent Christmas morning in the emergency room with false labor, pains alone, while you were probably closing some deal in Switzerland." "I was in Singapore," he admitted quietly. "The Yamamoto acquisition. Of course you were." A bitter laugh escaped her. Do you know what it's like to find out you're carrying twins when you can barely afford to feed yourself? To have your blood pressure spike because you're working 2 jobs while growing 2 babies? To lie awake at night, wondering if you're going to be able to give them everything they deserve? Celeste, I would have sent money. She finished his thought. Written a check, hired the best doctors, bought the biggest cribs, set up trust funds. You would have managed the pregnancy like a business transaction, but you wouldn't have been there. For the appointments where I heard their heartbeats for the first time, you wouldn't have felt them kick or helped me pick names or held my hair when morning sickness lasted all day. Each word was a scalpel, cutting away the illusions he'd built about their relationship. Donovan felt the weight of his failures settling over him like a shroud. The night I found out, Celeste continued, her voice softer now, more vulnerable. I was 2 weeks pregnant. It was our last night together before the separation papers were finalized. Do you remember? He did. How could he forget? They'd made love with a desperation that bordered on violence, both knowing it was goodbye. Celeste had cried afterward, and he'd held her, promising things would change, knowing even as he said it that they wouldn't. You left for the office before I woke up, she whispered. Even on our last morning, Sterling Industries came first. I took the pregnancy test that afternoon. 2 pink lines that changed everything. Why didn't you tell me then? Because I realized something while staring at those lines. I didn't want my children growing up the way I did in our marriage, fighting for scraps of their father's attention, competing with conference calls for his love. I wanted them to know what it felt like to be someone's priority, not their obligation. Donovan leaned forward, his hands clasped so tightly his knuckles were white. Celeste, listen to me, please. I know I failed you. I know I chose the company over us, over and over again. But when they called tonight, when they said you might die, his voice cracked. I realized I could lose every dollar, watch my entire empire crumble, and it wouldn't matter. But losing you, living in a world where you don't exist, that would destroy me completely. Pretty words, she said, echoing what she told him before. You always were good with those. Then let me prove it. He stood, pacing to the window. I've already called the board. Garrett's taking over as CEO. I'll maintain ownership but no operational control. No more 18-hour days. No more choosing mergers over family dinners. No more. You can't just restructure your personality like a corporate acquisition, Celeste interrupted. Love isn't a business plan, Donovan. It's daily choices, small moments, being present even when nothing urgent is happening. I know that now. He turned back to her, and she saw something in his eyes she'd never seen before. Complete surrender. I spent 3 years building an empire and 36 hours watching you fight for your life. Guess which taught me more about what really matters? Before Celeste could respond, a sharp cry pierced the quiet air. Then another, more insistent. Aurora, Celeste breathed, maternal instinct overriding everything else. Aurora? Donovan's eyebrows rose. I picked names. Was that wrong? She seemed like an Aurora when I saw her, suddenly uncertain, vulnerable. It's perfect, he said softly. What about our son? Sebastian, she whispered. Strong and noble, like his father could be, if he chose to be. The crying intensified, and despite everything between them, Celeste started to move, trying to get out of bed. Hey, no. Donovan was beside her instantly. You just had major surgery. I'll check on them. You don't know how. Then teach me, he said simply. Teach me everything I've missed. Let me learn how to be the father they deserve, the husband you deserved all along. The first week at Mercy General became Donovan's masterclass in everything he'd missed about life. While Celeste recovered from surgery, restricted to bed rest and brief wheelchair, trips to the nursery, Donovan practically moved into the hospital. Mr. Sterling, you really should go home and shower, Nurse Patricia suggested on day 3. Finding him asleep in the uncomfortable reclining chair beside Celeste's bed at 6 a.m., his $1,000 shirt was wrinkled beyond salvation, and his usually perfect hair stuck up at odd angles. I'm fine, he mumbled, immediately alert. How are the babies? Did Sebastian eat? Aurora was fussy around midnight. Sir, you're not fine. You look like you've been hit by a truck. But Patricia was smiling. In 30 years of nursing, she'd never seen anything like it. Down in the break room, the night shift nurses gathered for their usual gossip session. The billionaire's still here, whispered Maria, stirring her coffee. Day 4. Same clothes, same chair. Heard he turned down 3 board meetings yesterday, added Jennifer. told his assistant that his children's feeding schedule was more important than quarterly projections. Yesterday I caught him talking to baby girl like she was his business partner, Patricia chuckled. He was explaining why her brother gets fussy when she cries, using actual negotiation tactics. Aurora, let's find a win-win solution here. What they didn't share was how they'd all witnessed his transformation in real time. The man who'd burst through their doors demanding answers had become someone entirely different. Someone who changed diapers with shaking hands while whispering apologies for being clumsy. Someone who sang lullabies so off-key that other babies in the nursery seemed to stop crying just to listen in amazement. Twinkle, twinkle, little star. Donovan's voice cracked through the nursery. At 2 a.m., holding Sebastian against his chest while Aurora slept nearby. How I wonder what you are. He paused, looking down at his son's serious face. I wonder if you'll forgive me for missing the first 8 months of your existence. I wonder if you'll let me make up for lost time. From her wheelchair in the doorway, Celeste watched silently. She'd told the night nurse she needed to use the bathroom, but really she'd been drawn by the sound of his voice. For 4 days, she'd maintained her walls, protecting herself from hope. But seeing him like this, vulnerable, gentle, completely focused on their children, was slowly dismantling her defenses. Your daddy's not very good at singing, she said softly, wheeling herself closer. Donovan startled, nearly dropping Sebastian. I thought you were sleeping. Hard to sleep when you're performing concert-level entertainment down the hall. She positioned her wheelchair next to his chair. You're getting better, though. Yesterday you were completely tone-deaf. Tonight you're only mostly tone-deaf. For the first time since the hospital, he smiled, really smiled. High praise from someone who used to sing professionally. Coffee shop performances hardly count as professional. But she was smiling, too, her first genuine one since waking up. They sat in comfortable silence, watching their children sleep. Aurora's tiny hand had found Sebastian's, their fingers intertwined even in dreams. They know each other, Celeste murmured. Before they knew us, they knew each other. Maybe that's why they're so calm when they're together. They're not facing the world alone. The observation hung between them, loaded with meaning. Neither of them had faced much of anything together during their marriage. They'd been two people living parallel lives that occasionally intersected for dinner or corporate events. Donovan, Celeste said finally, if we're going to do this, and I'm not saying we are, but if we try again, everything has to be different, not just your schedule, the way we communicate, the way we make decisions, the way we prioritize our family. Tell me what you need. Partnership, real partnership. Not you making grand gestures and expecting me to fall in line. Not me making passive-aggressive comments when you disappoint me. We talk, we negotiate, we compromise. Like a merger. Exactly like a merger. Except this time, nobody gets acquired. We become something new together. Donovan shifted Sebastian to one arm and reached for Celeste's hand. What would that look like practically? Family dinner at 6, non-negotiable. Phones off, laptops closed. Sunday mornings are sacred. No work calls, no emergencies unless someone's actually dying. When the babies are old enough, we take real vacations, not working trips where I'm dragged along as an accessory. Done. What else? You don't get to make unilateral decisions about their future. No boarding schools because it's what Sterling men do. No pressure to join the family business. They get to choose their own paths. Agreed. Anything else? Date nights. Once a week, just us. Even if it's just walking around the block when they're asleep. We need to remember why we fell in love before we fell apart. True love requires sacrifice. Share this story if you agree that real relationships demand we choose each other every single day, not just when it's convenient. I can do that, Donovan said quietly. All of it. But I need something from you too. What? Patience. I'm going to mess up. I'm going to default to CEO mode sometimes. I'm 33 years old and I'm learning how to be a father and a real husband for the first time. I need you to call me out when I slip. Not just build resentment until you can't stand it anymore. Celeste studied his face in the soft nursery lighting. The man holding their son looked nothing like the polished executive she'd married. This version was raw, honest, completely present. I can do that, she said finally. But only if you promise to listen when I do. I promise. As if sensing the gravity of the moment, both babies stirred simultaneously. Tiny voices joining in a harmony that somehow sounded like hope. 2 weeks later, the Sterling penthouse underwent a transformation that would have shocked any architectural magazine. Gone were the sterile glass sculptures and imposing modern art pieces. In their place, soft blankets draped over leather furniture, creating makeshift changing stations. The formal dining room now housed 2 cribs positioned side by side, baby. Monitors, and a mountain of supplies that seemed to multiply daily. "This place actually feels like a home," Celeste murmured, settling into the rocking chair Donovan had positioned by the floor-to-ceiling windows. Aurora nestled against her shoulder, finally quiet after an hour of fussing. Donovan looked up from where he sat cross-legged on the Persian rug, Sebastian on his lap, surrounded by instruction. Manuals for baby swings, carriers, and an alarming number of gadgets he'd insisted they needed. "I hired a team to childproof everything," he said, gesturing toward cabinet locks and corner guards. "Apparently, babies become mobile surprisingly quickly. They're 3 weeks old, Donovan. They can barely hold their heads up. I believe in being prepared." He held up a manual titled Baby's First Steps. "Did you know some children walk as early as 9 months? That's only 6 months away." Celeste laughed, the first real laugh he'd heard from her since before their separation. "You're approaching fatherhood like a hostile takeover. Is that bad?" "No," she said softly, watching him navigate the chaos of their new reality, with the same intensity he'd once reserved for board meetings. "It's actually wonderful, just different from what I expected." Their days had developed a rhythm unlike anything Donovan had ever experienced. Feeding schedules ruled his calendar instead of conference calls. He'd learned to function on 2-hour sleep cycles, to distinguish between Aurora's hungry cry and her tired cry, to change diapers with the efficiency of a Formula One pit crew. 3 weeks after bringing the twins home, Donovan found Celeste on the terrace at sunset, the city lights beginning to twinkle below them. She stood leaning against the railing, her figure still soft from pregnancy, her hair catching the last rays of golden light. "How are you feeling?" he asked, joining her at the railing. "Tired, overwhelmed, happy." She paused. "Confused. About what?" "About this. About us. About whether we're building something real or just playing house because we have children together." Donovan reached into his pocket, his fingers closing around the small velvet box he'd carried for days, waiting for the right moment. "I've been thinking about that too." He dropped to one knee on the terrace, and Celeste's breath caught. "Celeste, 3 years ago, I proposed with a 5-carat diamond and a speech about merger benefits. I talked about tax advantages and combined assets like we were forming a corporation. Donovan, this time, I want to propose to the woman who chose love over luxury, who raised our children alone rather than settle for half my attention. I want to marry the mother who sang to our babies while I was learning how to hold them. I want to be the husband who chooses you every morning, not just on convenient days." He opened the box, revealing a simple band set with 2 small stones, one deep red, one brilliant blue, ruby for Aurora, sapphire for Sebastian. Their birthstones. This ring isn't about displaying wealth or making a statement. It's about carrying our children with us always, choosing our family first, every single decision we make. Tears streamed down Celeste's cheeks. "Why now? Why not wait until we know this is working?" "Because I don't want to wait another day to promise you forever. Because every sunrise since they were born, I've watched you be the most incredible mother, and I want to spend the rest of my life being worthy of you." He took her hand, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "Marry me again, Celeste. Not the CEO this time, not the billionaire, just Donovan. A man who finally understands that love isn't something you manage or optimize. It's something you choose, every day, in every small moment." "Yes," she whispered, then louder, more certain. "Yes, I'll marry you." Again. As he slipped the ring onto her finger, a cry drifted from inside. 1 baby, then 2. "Our cue." Celeste laughed through her tears. "Perfect timing," Donovan agreed, standing and pulling her close. "Ready to answer our children's call together?" "Ready," she said, and for the first time since their reunion, she truly meant it. 6 months later, the Sterling family had found their rhythm. The penthouse buzzed with the organized chaos of twin toddlers learning to crawl. Donovan's corner office remained empty most afternoons while he worked from home, fielding calls between diaper changes and impromptu dance parties in the living room. Sterling Industries posts record quarterly profits under new leadership, read the headline Celeste showed him over breakfast. "Good for Garrett," Donovan said, not looking up from where he was attempting to feed Aurora, who had developed strong opinions about strained peas. "He's doing better than I ever did." "Any regrets?" Only one. He met her eyes across their cluttered kitchen table, Sebastian babbling happily in his high chair, that it took almost losing everything to understand what wealth actually means. The moral of Donovan and Celeste's story crystallizes into one undeniable truth: success without love is failure, no matter how impressive your bank account appears. You can build the greatest empire in the world, but if you come home to empty rooms and broken relationships, you've lost the only game that truly matters. Let me ask you something. What empire are you building while your kingdom crumbles? Are you so focused on climbing the ladder that you've forgotten who you're climbing for? How many anniversaries have you missed for meetings? How many bedtime stories have you skipped for conference calls? How many chances have you let slip away while chasing the next promotion, the next deal, the next achievement that promises to make you worthy of love you already had? Donovan Sterling learned the hardest lesson life can teach. You can't buy back time. You can't negotiate with regret. You can't merge your way into forgiveness. Love requires presence, not presence. It demands your attention, not your ambition. It needs your time, not your money. The greatest investments aren't made in stock markets or real estate. They're made in quiet moments, in showing up, in choosing connection over convenience every single day. If this story has touched your heart, if it's made you think about your own priorities, subscribe to this channel for more stories about second chances, true love, and what really matters in life. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Comment below and tell us about a time you chose love over ambition, or when you wished you had. That evening, as Donovan sat in the nursery reading Goodnight Moon for the 100th time, Aurora looked up at him with her mother's green eyes and spoke her first word. Dada. Sebastian, not to be outdone, echoed his sister. Dada. Donovan's eyes filled with tears as he realized that for the first time in his life, someone's first word was his name, not because of his wealth or position, but because he was simply completely joyfully present. And that, he finally understood, was the greatest success story of all. Remember, true wealth isn't what you accumulate. It's what you're willing to give up for love.